Well, hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your host, James Avramenko, back once again with a brand new solo episode. It is the end of May, and you know what that means. It's time for a brand new end of May wrap-up episode. We're going to reflect back on the ups and the downs of the month. We're going to do a deep dive into the duality of solitude versus loneliness. And of course, we got a brand new batch of listener questions and all sorts of other goodies, so let's get into it. It's time to lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy this end of the month wrap-up solo episode here on Friendless. So the month of May has come and gone, and along with it, all the played out, it's going to be May memes. The life cycle of memes always kind of fascinates me. The idea of there's the sort of the origin point where it's like surprising and funny, and then it gets repeated and it gets kind of disseminated through the tiers of social medias, and then it becomes kind of saturated. But especially with these kind of like annual ones, you could see the year on year who keeps doing it. Who's sharing the Happy October 3rd day for Mean Girls kind of thing. And I'm certain this is part of my kind of like ornery, I became an old man when I was 12 type vibes. But I find myself feeling this kind of like dread tension around some of them, So when April's winding down and I know some people are going to start sharing those ramen photos of Justin Timberlake and all that. But also, much to my relief, those memes have predominantly shifted over into the sort of the Facebook level of sharing, and so I don't really see them anymore. At the start of the month, I had set a goal, as I talked about it in my previous solo episode, that I was going to try and make a point to reach out to a friend or someone I care about at least once a day, every day for the whole month of May. And I was reflecting on it, and what's funny is that I did technically accomplish that goal, and yet for some reason inside I still feel unfulfilled. And now I'm sure this is something I could talk about with my therapist. I'm sure this is something he has heard me talk about many, many times, and probably is sick of hearing about. But it's yet another kind of pointed example of this idea of sometimes we don't realize the progress we're making because progress doesn't really feel like progress if it's incremental. Right? If it's just sort of like slowly but surely coming along and day by day you're just sort of adjusting slightly, it doesn't really feel like a change. It's sort of like, if you go back and you look at a photo of yourself 1 year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago, you don't really notice the changes until you actually see the photo and you see, holy shit, that's where I was. That's what I looked like. That's what I was wearing or whatever it might be. Those are the people I was hanging out with. Jesus, And I can't help but feel like that's sort of what this month represented for me, is that in reflection, my instinct is to tell myself that I didn't really accomplish much. And yet at the same time, too, I know that I placed a lot of foundational work and a lot of kind of iterative work that this kind of friend outreach goal is an example of, in that, it's not big, it's not flashy, it's not something that I can kind of like display and brag about on social media, but it is something that every day, once a day, I took a moment to practice and try out, and the reception was absolutely lovely. The funny thing was that a lot of the time now, I don't know if these people were listening to the show and were taking on the initiative from that, or if they were just feeling friendly. But a lot of the month was actually prompted by other people reaching out first, and that was just that tickled me absolutely pink. Nothing makes me happier. Few things, I should say. Let's watch those black and whites. But very few things make me happier than an unprompted "Hey, how the hell are ya?" or a meme, or a "Hey, let's go see a movie," or whatever it might be. Especially coming from people who understand that I'm very much the embodiment of I'm probably going to say no, but I still want to be invited. And the people who have the patience to try again, because I know how insufferable that is. I know how annoying that can be. And I am working on it. And I said yes to many things this month that at other times I very likely would have just instinctively said no, curled up under my blankets, and then wondered why nobody invites me out to things. But that kind of incremental practice is really what the focus of the whole month has been. And I feel like I can pretty confidently chalk that up to a victory, as much as my kind of goblin brain wants to tell me all the things I did wrong. Which, of course, does lead me into this sort of, pros and cons, ups and downs. There's goods, there's bads, there's in-betweens. As 50 Cent so eloquently put it once, sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. And I think that really says a lot about life, don't you? But I find myself at a crossroads. One of the things I really wanted to get out by the end of this month that I didn't is my chapbook, and I'm kind of beating myself up about that. And at the same time too, I also really wanted to expand my sort of promotional content of the show in general. When I relaunched in April, I had this massive surge of listeners because I was sharing content that was, engaging and interesting and exciting. And, I don't want to just chalk it up to the guests, even though obviously the guests had played a huge part in it, but it was just sort of like the whole blitz. And as the weeks have gone on, I just haven't been able to keep up to it, and I haven't been able to maintain the same schedule. And it's something that I'm working on refocusing for the coming months. But we'll kind of see how it plays. And I am just trying to sort of be gentle with myself of like, I'm doing this alone. I'm figuring it out as I go. Even seven years in, I'm still learning stuff. I'm still figuring out how to do stuff. And so, it's a process, right? And I think I'm just trying to vocalize that it is okay to not be where you want to be. That doesn't mean where you are isn't enough. It just means you have further you still want to go. And I think that says a lot about life, too. Look at us. Me and 50 Cent, just speaking truths, right? But that really does speak to kind of what has been on my mind a lot lately is the idea of dualities or, dialectics. When I record this, I am about to have my very last session of my DBT group this week. And throughout this whole 6-month process, so much of my thinking, so much of my contemplation, so much of my exploration has been around this idea of releasing black and white, releasing binary thinking, and instead allowing two or multiple things to be true, and understanding that when something hurts, that doesn't mean good can't come out of it. And when something feels good, that doesn't mean harm can't come out of it. And understanding that nothing exists within a vacuum, and that we need to it's beneficial to us to recognize the interplay between these kind of dueling interpretations of life. And instead of kind of spending my days actively trying to be comfortable and actively trying to stay in my little cocoon, instead sort of venturing out and recognizing that growth really only happens in discomfort. There's a reason it's a tired old metaphor of like, plants only grow under pressure and all that kind of thing, because it's true. And I know we all hate it when a cliche bears some truth, but, it really is the only way to truly grow is to get out of your comfort zone and to get into something that's going to kind of challenge you. And that's very much what the guests of this month have brought forth into kind of my thinking and the things that I've been exploring. My recent interview with Magda Baker, he had this incredible metaphor about he called it something along the lines of the grilled cheese theory, which is this idea that sometimes tasks can feel absolutely impossible until we just go out and do them. Just make the grilled cheese, even though I know you ate yesterday and you don't want to cook, but sometimes a task can feel impossible until you do it and you recognize it's just making a grilled cheese. It's nothing. Right? Anybody can do that. And so understanding that sometimes the narratives we create in our minds make things worse than they actually are. And we put more pressure on ourselves than need to be there in an effort to, it's a beautiful instinct that our brain has here, right? Our brain's instinct behind that is we got to protect ourselves. We got to make sure we stay safe. We got to make sure we stay alive. The trouble comes in that our little instinct brain hasn't really caught up to the modern world and hasn't recognized when something feels unsafe versus when something is actually unsafe. Obviously, there's so much nuance behind that. When my brain goes into certain contexts, and I'm sure yours does as well, recognizing that is contextually speaking. I'm not saying like, yeah, if you feel bad about getting into an elevator with scary men, like, don't listen to your brain, right? Like, no. That's not what I'm meaning at all. I'm saying, but it's like, I don't want to do my laundry, right? Context here, okay? But the other piece behind this grilled cheese theory is this idea of, finding joy and finding hope in small steps, not beating yourself up because these monumental steps haven't been taken or these monumental accomplishments, but instead allowing yourself to just feel absolute joy in the little things. Which leads me into something that my interview with Dr. Christine Cooper reminded me of, which is about intentionality and being really concrete about what those steps are going to be. We can't expect others to show up and know who we are, what we're about, what we want, if we, haven't communicated it to them, but before that, actually, haven't communicated it to ourselves. And funny enough, this is actually something I was just talking about with my therapist in our last session, is this idea of you don't actually have to communicate it to people. That's actually not what it's about. But communicating it to yourself is probably the most key, because if you know what you're about and you know what you want, you can then start looking to the world to, how to enact it. This is a piece that this last section of DBT that I've been doing is about radical acceptance. And it's this idea that you can't change something if you don't first accept what it is. And you don't have to like the way reality is. You don't have to be okay with the way reality is, but you do have to accept that is what reality is. I don't like parts of my past. I don't like how I behaved. I don't like how others behaved. I don't like choices that were made. I don't like situations I was in. XYZ. That doesn't change the fact that they happened. And there's nothing I can do now to alter those events. That's done. It's in the past. It's gone. But what I can do is I can accept that those really happened, and I now get a chance to behave differently going forward. So, in the sense that, as I'm often parroting from my therapist about awareness is half the battle, you can't change something until you're aware of it, and then you have to accept that is what it is. You can be mindful of what you would like it to be. You can be mindful of where you would like to go, but you can't say, well, I don't like that because it shouldn't be like that. And it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be, but it is. So tough shit, right? And when you accept it, you then can move into what steps do I actually want to take in order to create the environment that I want? What boundaries do I need? What understandings do I need? What concessions do I need? Whatever it might be, so that you can first communicate it to yourself and then communicate it to the people you want around you. Which takes me right into my biggest takeaway from my third interview with my dear friend Mel Z, talking about how to behave with authenticity. Oftentimes we find ourselves kind of acting out of instinct, and we think that's who we are. And in a way, it absolutely is. That's sort of our baseline protective brain behavior. But when we regulate ourselves, when we collect our thoughts, and when we act with intention, that allows us to show up with the most authenticity possible. And while that doesn't mean showcasing our entirety to, for the world to consume, that doesn't necessarily mean like I'm going to share my, every deepest, darkest secret to TikTok. That also means allowing the people around us to experience the full scope of our being. Not hiding parts of us because of shame or because of resistance or whatever it might be. If you need to express a part of yourself to someone and you don't because you're afraid that they will no longer be around, that means they shouldn't be around already. And so when we act with an authenticity, what that does is it pulls people in who are supposed to be there, and it pushes people away who aren't. So don't be afraid of the sort of full spectrum of who you are, and don't dim that light because it might keep somebody around longer. It's going to be always more beneficial to let those people go. than it is to dim your authenticity in order to keep them around a little bit longer. Because they're gonna go one way or another. That's what's gonna happen. So you might as well rip the Band-Aid now. I was listening back to the interviews of the month, and these themes kept on popping up. The idea of as I've been exploring throughout the last couple of seasons, community versus the individual, the action of being a friend, curiosity, openness, boundaries, respect, and it really started again reflecting back this idea of duality and the dialectics of these kinds of questions. And one of the sort of as I touched on earlier, one of the sort of concepts that I've been sort of pushing through that lens has been the idea of solitude versus isolation, and how it can go from being a safe haven to being a pressure cooker, and how do we strike some sort of balance. Recognizing again, another reminder from Scott, there is no such thing as balance. And balance actually doesn't really need to be your end goal. It's never going to be a 50-50 thing. It's just going to be, what is your scale, right? What is it you want out of this? But understanding that, solitude can be beautiful and nourishing and replenishing and recharging, and then it can also be really draining and scary and dysregulating, right? So I wanted to sort of dive into that thought a little bit more, and then I wanted to offer a couple tools that I have been working with recently around my own kind of processing of my solitude versus my isolation, and try and give you a few actionable things that you can try out if you are so inclined. So when I say the word solitude, what comes to mind for you? For me, as with most words, it bears so many contradictory feelings. I know. Again, as with most words, especially these sort of big, I was about to say is implicative. That's not a word. Implicit. The sort of the implication. It's all about the implication. The implication behind most words often triggers a bit of a gut negative reaction in me, and that's something I'm working on. But on one hand, there's these feelings of sanctuary, right? There's the emotional reprieve. You're allowed to kind of take a pause and decompress for whether it's from daily stresses or whatever it might be. But you get to recharge, reset, and just sort of be without external demands. There's the benefits of quiet time. Things are so loud in this world, and solitude really allows you to just sort of like, if what you want is silence, then you get silence. More often than not, art, at least my art, isn't really created collectively. It's difficult to write a poem in a group. Obviously, it can be done, but it's not often I work in groups. So even things like body doubling or co-working, it's often, I find it very difficult to get into those sort of deep concentration zones for creativity. And so solitude is so fundamental to my creative practice, to allow me to sort of ruminate and really chew on something and really unpack it. And of course, it allows for moments of mindfulness. If a mindfulness practice isn't already established and already a very natural, instinctual element, it doesn't come very easily around other people. Something that they've been introducing in the last couple sessions in DBT has been getting us to do mindful practices around things that are like quite stimulating, quite chaotic, really, and it's difficult. But it is also, it's really rewarding when you're like, oh yeah, I can totally practice mindfulness in the club, or listening to loud music or whatever it might be. But if you're establishing those practices, you really want to get started in a sort of solo solitude type environment. Allowing there to be space for your inner monologue to come out and really talk to you. It's another thing in DBT around the idea of wise mind. One of the ways that we can practice wise mind is by literally stopping and asking ourselves, what is the wise mind choice here? And not just rushing to the answer, but really sitting with it and allowing that piece of us to come out and speak. I'm going to be doing a much more fulsome exploration of all the DBT steps. I've been waiting to get through the entire program before I sort of reflect on it, because I really want to talk about how it's impacted me, how I've been implementing the different tools, and not just kind of like rush in because I'm like so giddy about it. I will say, sneak peek, it's changed my life, and I feel just so much more equipped for life's travails around it. Do you know travail? Here's a fun digression. Travail is derived from, obviously, a French word, travail, which is another word for work, but it actually derives from a medieval torture device. I believe it was called the travail or the travailo or something like that. And it was essentially a big rod that they would shove up people's asses. And so, technically speaking, the etymology of the word work comes from shoving a big rod up your ass. I just find that charming, because I really feel like that says a lot about life and a lot about work, doesn't it? Where was I? Isolation, solitude. Right. Obviously there's the benefits. There's also the negatives, right? With solitude comes isolation, comes loneliness, comes these feelings of if you don't want to be alone, but you find yourself there and you feel kind of trapped within the prison of your little cave. And suddenly all those little creature comforts that you've built around you become these kind of impregnable walls, and you don't really know how to get out. Now, obviously, through practice, you would start challenging those questions. Often when we say things like, I don't know how, it's actually saying, I don't want to do that. Right? As adults, we often do know how to do most things. We just don't want to. Right. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that that's fine. You don't have to. But I think this sort of learned helplessness that we all apply at one point or another, more often than not, is something that's worth kind of challenging. But that instinctual feeling of I don't know how to get out of this, it leads into this kind of overwhelming freeze and lockdown. It can lead to these moments of self-critique. If you sit in silence long enough, the other voices are going to creep in, right? And you might have chosen, this is going to be empowering, and I'm going to love this, and then the other voice starts whispering, it's because they don't want to hang out with you, or it's because whatever the stories you want to tell yourself. And so it can become a sort of a self-perpetuating Ouroboros of negative self-talk and criticism. And that's where that's sort of, the only word I can come up with right now is balance, but don't envision it as like a 50-50. It's more about like, what are your scales? How do you want to determine the weight of each scale of connection versus solitude? And really, the first thing you need to determine is exactly that. What are your personal needs? Do you need to see people a lot? Do you need to just have kind of set times? Does it need to be daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be? And recognizing all of these are fluid. They're not locked in. It's not, I made this choice, so I have to always be doing it. It's, what do you want to try out first? Do you want to try out seeing your friend once a week? Do you want to try out calling your friend once a day, whatever it might be? So first, kind of determining what are your personal thresholds around the need for solitude and then the need for connection, and sort of experimenting with, what is your threshold where that solitude sort of channels or encourages, whether it's creativity or mindfulness or whatever, but then tips itself past that level and moves into, sort of eroding your emotional well-being. So maybe you experiment with this by playing with a calendar. Maybe you lay out for 1 week, you try seeing someone once a day, and then you kind of gauge your sort of energy metrics, like how nourished did you feel? How good did you feel? How many spoons did you use up? Planning that, how many spoons did you use going to do that activity, whatever it might be, and how do you recharge those? Actually, another digression. I often that's sort of the idea of spoons. I don't know if this is common for everybody. There's this idea behind, if you were to open up your cutlery drawer and you have spoons in there, but you only have so many spoons, right? And so every choice is a spoon. And that takes up sort of like brain power, right? So, but some people have lots of spoons, some people don't have many, and so you have to be really, really cognizant. No matter how many spoons you got, you have to be really cognizant of how many you use. I often will I equate it to spell slots. Having been having been a D&D player off and on for years, I'll often refer to them as like I've used up my spell slots. And if any of you are familiar with D&D, the only way to get those back is to have a long rest, right? So yeah, D&D is for the autists. But yeah, it whatever, however you want to kind of metaphorize it, it's about the energy it takes to think these things through and to actually enact them, and making sure that you have enough energy in place in order to perform that desired activity. Maybe you want to play around with what those activities are. Maybe you try coffee hangouts. Maybe you try movies. Maybe you try like unstructured. Let's just I've got puttering things to do. Why don't you come over and hang out in my apartment while I clean, or whatever it might be. Maybe it's let's go for a hike. It could be big energy, it could be low energy, whatever it might be. But I think playing with the variance is really beneficial to sort of see not only how much it connects you to that person, but also how much it drains you, for lack of a better way of putting it, is what is your sort of energy commitment to these different kind of activities. Understanding, obviously, there's so many metrics that go into it. Did you eat today? How did you sleep yesterday? What's the weather like? Do you have to drive there? Was there traffic? Like these things are all factors that you can start to sort of play around with, and it's not a science, it's mostly vibes, but it's a way for you to sort of be a little bit more mindful about the whole process of your day, rather than just going onto autopilot and then at the end of the day being like, why do I feel dysregulated and tired when I haven't actually done anything? I know, me personally, I'm really served by consistency, especially because my brain struggles to be consistent, and I'm more often than not kind of nourished by oh god, I always forget the word, novelty. I find myself really attracted to the novel and the exciting, but that doesn't always lead to good things, and so I'm trying to train myself to find the fun in consistency and find the fun in scheduling and repetition. So one thing that I've been trying to do is essentially these blocks throughout my day, and I add buffers to all of them. So I have these like 10-minute buffer, which allows me to kind of have some breathing room, to stretch my legs, move around, whatever. And then these blocks of, and they vary. It can be anywhere from 10 minutes, half hour, whatever it is, depending on the task or the activity or whatever it might be. These can be big, these can be small, but I always make sure there's also like transition periods throughout. This has been incredibly helpful for me to just like block out my day, and I do it for the whole week. And it doesn't mean every single block is specifically I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. What I do is I look at my week, I block it out, kind of theoretically, of like, okay, I'll do an hour here with a 10-minute buffer, an hour here, 10-minute buffer, yada yada yada. But then there is still some room for flexibility, because let's say when it comes to my day job, tasks change, stuff like that. So I still need to be really flexible there. Plans change with friends, so things come up sometimes. Sometimes my energy just isn't there, and so I had blocked the thing and I can't do it, whatever it might be. But having that sort of visualization of what the week could be, and then playing with it from there has been really, really helpful for me. So yeah, time blocking has been an incredible one. And this can work both ways too. This doesn't have to be only planning for activities. This is also planning for solitude, right? This planning for, these are going to be times where I put my phone away. I don't turn to the TV to regulate. I put tech away. I read a book, or I just listen to music, or I go for a walk, or whatever it might be. But finding time and planning for time where you're by yourself and you are reflecting and you are purposefully turning inward is going to be really, really helpful. And my biggest tool, it's really cheesy and everybody rolls their eyes at it and everybody always gets recommended and then doesn't do it. But my biggest tool that I will always, always, always be harping on is to journal. Write it out. Get it out of you. You don't have to be the great poet. You don't have to be the next whatever writer you like, it's just about getting it out of you. One piece of information that I was given last year that has really rocked me is this idea that just expressing the thought out of your body helps to move that emotion out of you. So, if you're not, let's say, you're really angry, but you don't want to yell at, your partner or your dad or whoever it is. Just sitting down and writing that out is going to have the same effect on your nervous system as it would be if you were screaming it. So, as I say, I know it's cheesy. I know people always are like, oh, yeah, well, maybe I should journal about it, but honestly, try it and actually try it. Just don't just do it once or twice and then be like, why am I still mad all the time? Right? It's about, again, consistency. Sit down, journal every day. I have for the last, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, I don't even know. I have in some capacity journaled in the morning and in the evening, and that continues to be one of my best, most effective outlets. For me, obviously, I'm a writer, and so I do use a lot of this journal content in projects and stuff like that. So it's obviously there's a few layers for me, but it doesn't have to be the case for you. It can be just as much as a personal, private expression as it can be, something that you turn into airing your dirty underwear to the public, right? But yeah, if I had just one or two pieces of advice, I would say try that time blocking and fucking journal, and don't quit pretending you're better than journaling. You're not better than journaling. Get that ego out of here, bucko. If you're interested in trying journaling or getting back into it or continuing or trying a different way, whatever it might be, any of the spectrum of ways you could come to it, I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenge. One of the things I've been really harping on this season, and especially on myself and in the interviews, is this idea of self-respect. Unconditional. We've talked about unconditional self-love. I'm moving into this idea of unconditional self-respect, and all of that is around this idea of compassion, right? Empathy. I know for me personally, it's very easy for me to empathize with other people. I can feel their pain and I can care about their pain. I can't always give that to myself the same way. And so what I practice is unconditional self-compassion. And I would challenge you to try that in your journaling journaling prompts. My mouth got a little ahead of my brain there. Or maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. How do brains and mouths work? Anyway, where was I? Journal about it. One thing you could try doing. Again, I know this is cheesy. I know you're gonna say, okay, thanks. Insert cheesy Instagram guru name here. But wake up in the morning and journal about 5 things that you love about yourself. Now, I do a thing where I literally, when I wake up, the first time I see myself in the mirror, I give myself a compliment. And I try, I don't always succeed, but I try every time I catch my reflection in any surface, no matter where I am. If I catch my reflection, I stop and I give myself a compliment. It's really embarrassing, and it's really hard to not roll my eyes. But if you don't feel like you want to try that, then journaling is a much more private, much simpler way of doing it. But I would challenge you to every day for a week, start your day by journaling about 5 things you love about yourself, unconditionally. Don't caveat, don't undercut, just say 5 things that rule about you. I promise you can come up with 5 things. Everybody has good things about them, especially you. That's right. I'm talking to you, baby. I had intentions to sort of bridge these questions of isolation and solitude into these sort of moments of introspection and sort of how do we reflect on ourselves more. I think I might continue it in a different episode, but I'm going to touch on it here, because all of this work kind of comes to nothing if we're not integrating it into our understanding of ourselves. Now, again, there is a sort of a golden ratio around this. It isn't about like always sitting and navel gazing. You are already enough. You're already great. Whoever you are right now, you're already awesome. It's that, like, if we want a deeper understanding of ourselves, why do we do these things? Recognizing that the loop you're in, that's your loop. That's the loop you're going to have for the rest of your life. That's just sort of like that's how it's going to play out in one way or another. But how it plays out, to what intensity and the resolution of that loop is going to change every time you play through it. And one of the ways to sort of alter that loop is by deeply reflecting on how you showed up in the last loop or the loop before that or whatever it might be. And you do that by first really getting interior and really asking yourself, why. And you can't do these explorations without first getting really good with isolation and really good and comfortable with solitude. For me, after moments of great rupture in my life, whether it's big breakups, big traumas, whatever it might be, taking space to reflect on what's happened, how I showed up in it, what was my part in it, what was other people's, and how could I behave differently, has been incredibly healing. There's always this, or there's often this impulse to pass blame elsewhere, right? And to say, well, they fucked up here, they fucked up here, they fucked up here, and to just not reflect on ourselves. And that's not to say, you should shoulder all the blame and forgive them unconditionally and all that. It takes two to tango here, but you're only in control of how you show up, right? So taking that time to really process what happened, at least from your perspective, recognizing that, our perception of reality is skewed. It will always be fundamentally lacking all of the facts. But as close as you can, how can you reconcile the truth of the situation? And how can you reconcile how you showed up and what you did to play your part in that scenario? You see how these all kind of like interlap with each other? It's the idea of like, being honest with yourself isn't about beating yourself up. It's about coming back to this idea of the radical acceptance of reality. It's not about, lashing yourself and saying, oh, I made this mistake or they made this mistake or that. It's about saying, I made this choice and they made this choice and this is what happened. And now, on reflecting on these facts as I can gather them, this is how I would like a situation that might be similar to that to play out differently in the future. We can't alter our behavior without first recognizing how we behaved and then allowing ourselves preparation for what if it arises again. So, I just recommend giving yourself as many tools as you can and preparing as much as you can, and then understanding that it's still going to play out the way it plays out. and more often than not, without practice and without a lot of iterations, it is just going to, play out pretty similar. And that's okay. It still doesn't make you a bad person. Still doesn't make them a bad person. It just means those are your loops, baby. But yeah, I have more, I want to talk more about kind of introspection. I want to talk more about resilience, but I am going to save it for the next one because I'm clocking the time and I don't want to babble on and on and on and on. And I really, really want to get to some listener questions. So I'm going to just punctuate this thought soup here and just say, yeah, get yourself a journal, be nice to yourself, and see what comes out of that. So we're gonna start with one that I was talking to a friend a while back, and I had to write this question down because we got talking about it and we were kind of laughing about it, and then I really started chewing on it and realizing that this question has the capacity to slip me into bitchy James mode. So I'm going to try and be cautious around that. But first question is, what friendship cliche absolutely does not apply to real life? And my instinctual reaction and my instinctual answer to them and to you now is the idea that you have to be a ride or die to be a good friend. Because I think that the best friends are the ones who push back. The best friends are the ones who don't enable you They're not the ones who say, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not even going to bother getting context around the situation. I'm just going to fuck with you and fuck the rest, right? I think those people are codependent and are actually probably doing more disservice to the both of you than to this sort of presumed friendship. So I think my deepest cliche is this idea of like, what's that thing of like, a real friend will help you get away with murder, but a great friend will ask you where to bury the body or whatever that fucking, I don't remember the saying, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's like the Hallmark card of like, it's probably got like that old woman with sunglasses and she's smoking on it and she's like, yeah, a real friend will tell you where to bury the bodies, or, like that kind of thing. It's like, no, that's horseshit. Because, that's a felony, but also because that's not a good friend. That's an enabler. And that is how these cycles of abuse perpetuate. Is abuse isn't a one-to-one experience. It's a communal experience. And that's why it's so traumatizing. Because not only does the abused person get abused by the abuser, they then get told why it wasn't abuse by their community. Because their community doesn't want to face up to the fact that they participated in that cycle of abuse. So yeah, people who are like, I got you back unconditionally, I'm like, no, you're the problem. And people who behave like that are actually kind of terrifying to me. They're very uncurious. I think that's what it boils down to for me. They're just a lack of curiosity and just being like, no, these are my people, we're done. I'm like, ugh. The next couple I've gathered from like comments and messages and stuff from my TikTok account. A lot of people on TikTok especially don't recognize that my username is the title of my podcast and instead think that I'm just like calling myself Friendless. I'm just like, they're like, oh, this poor middle-aged loser is just like apparently trying to wear that like a badge of honor, but I just feel sorry for him, and I have to be like, no, this isn't like a B-Rabbit moment. Like, I'm not trying to like get Clarence back at the rap battle kind of thing, But there was a couple questions about like being friendless that I thought I would include because they're cute. So this one was, do you see a meaningful difference between being intentionally alone and feeling involuntarily friendless? And how can shifting our mindset transform our experience of solitude? This was actually the question that kind of triggered my thoughts on this episode. And I do think I've kind of tapped into it, but I really appreciated the framing. And it's this idea of choosing to be alone versus feeling like it's been forced on you. And I think that there is a difference, but both are a choice. Okay. I'm trying to be cautious because I just don't want to keep on going back to the same well of like, well, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever, all my friends ditched me, but yada yada. But like, in the moment, it felt like I was being abandoned, But upon reflection, I realized what a blessing it was to lose that network, and what a blessing it was to forge my own path and to truly, fundamentally rebuild myself without any of that world involved. And so I think the difference between this sort of intentionality and involuntary is how you choose to frame it for yourself. If I decide I'm going to spend my day, what's that, Tony Soprano, walking around in pity of myself. If I'm just going to have a little pity party and I'm just going to say, oh, woe is me, I'm going to be stuck in there. But if I look at that same situation and I say, you know what, it happened and it sucked and I'm going to do something about it now, that's empowering, and it allows us to take lessons from the past in order to try and not repeat it. Again, all these concepts, they don't exist alone. They play with each other. It's like a little kindergarten. It's like, picture Muppet Babies, but all the Muppets are self-help ideas. Oh God, now I'm trying to remember the name of their babysitter. I can't remember it. I gotta Google that real quick. It was literally just Nanny. I was thought her name was something more than that, but nope, just Nanny. And I don't know why I thought of that. Maba Baby's concepts, themes, self-help. Yeah, you just, uh, it's okay. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine if you know, choose to feel bad. It's also fine if you choose to not feel bad. I just know for myself, choosing to frame it from a way that empowers me going forward. It doesn't invalidate what happened. It also doesn't dehumanize anybody who was a part of it. It was just, people made choices, and it's not, and there's the great villains of the 21st century. It's just like, yeah, people make choices because everybody's just deciding what they can in the moment with the tools they have, and not everybody is where you are or I am or whatever, right? So I think just, yeah, we do get to choose how we interpret these things. It's not quite as, I don't ascribe, I don't know, to the like that really cold stoicism level of like, I choose pain. Like, no, if somebody punches me in the face, I don't choose for that to hurt. It fucking hurts. But it's about choosing what meaning I put to it later. That's where I come into play. Um, Something sucks in the moment, but it doesn't have to keep sucking. And that doesn't mean I look back on it fondly. I can still look back and say, yeah, that fucking sucked. But out of it, I learned, resilience. I learned self-reliance. I learned self-compassion. Whatever it might be, right? So yeah, framing really is the hidden key there. And the last question I'm gonna do this month is another one that I've tapped into, I think, in the past, but we're gonna come back to it because it's another framing. Do you believe in seasonal friendships? The idea that some friendships are meant to last only for a phase in life. And I mean, the simple answer is yes, obviously. Anyway, that's our show, but but no, it's everything's seasonal is the thing. One of the things that it took several sessions with Scott to really ram it into my thick skull, but I've since come to really accept it and actually really cherish it and really celebrate it, is this idea that no relationship works out. None. It's not about working out because you're going to die and they're going to die. So no matter what, at the end of the day, every relationship will either end by choice or by death. There is no, and it all worked out. Because there's no, like, we just had the best day of our lives and cut to black, roll credits, and we never had another problem again, right? So everything is seasonal. And everything is transitional. And sometimes those seasons last longer than others, but they always end. Spring always rolls into summer. I'm trying to remember the summer always goes into fall, right? So releasing that need for perpetuity and releasing that need for continuity, I think, is really beneficial for everyone. And allowing people to be who they are. A while back, I think it was an episode with my dear friend Kira. Kiera. If you're listening, hi, I love you, I miss you. Please text me back. But she was talking about this idea of how, we're all on our own path, and sometimes those paths come really close to each other, and sometimes they veer away. But the path doesn't end until you're dead. And so, like, sometimes people go away, and sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't, and that both are fine. But just releasing this need for control of, well, we've been friends since we were 5, so we have to be friends forever, right? Like, that's sociopathic in my eyes. So instead, just recognizing how to celebrate the good when it's there and not only celebrating it when it's been taken away. It's that thing, again, this is so fucking cheesy and saccharine, but, it's Andy talks about it in The Office where he says, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before they're over. And the thing is that there is. It's by not worrying about the coming days and instead just allowing yourself to celebrate the good in the moment while you have it. And knowing, this too shall pass, right? It's the happiest and the saddest sentence in the English language, right? It will all end. And so allowing yourself to embrace the release, right? That's just gonna help you out so much in the long term. Okay, that is a wrap on listener questions for the month. If you have any questions, please fire my way anytime. Don't wait for a call for questions. Just send them to me, DM me at FriendlessPod on Instagram or TikTok. I'm constantly just collecting questions and filtering through them. So if you have any questions, whether friendship related, me related, whatever they might be, send them my way. I will be happy to answer them on a future episode if I can. But I wanted to move into one last segment. I tried it out last month, and I'm going to keep it going this month just because it's fun, and I like talking about this stuff. As I talked about, I make a playlist every month, and this month's was an absolute banger. And I just want to highlight a few. I'm going to include the link to the playlist in the show notes, so if you want to hear the whole thing, check that out there. But I wanted to highlight just a few key songs that have just been earworms for me this month. The first one was a recommendation from my friend Kyle. It's Milk and Diesel by the band Home Is Where. It's hard to describe what it is I love about this song. It's one of those songs that you know those songs where you put it on and in the first like 3 seconds you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be my favorite song for God knows how long. It just like slaps my ear. The vibes are just me, and I love it. And it's got my sweet harmonica in there. If you can get a harmonica into the song and not have it sound awful, which it can, I'll admit, you got a leg up in my books. And yeah, Milk and Diesel by Home Is Where. Love it. Next, Haim has put out a little EP kind of preview of their full album coming out soon. At least I think that's how it works. I don't know. They put out a bunch of songs, and then it looks like it's actually part of a bigger album that comes out later. I think that's... Anyway. And I've been listening to all those songs pretty much on repeat. But I've been oscillating between Relationships is a massive earworm, and the other one, Everybody's Trying to Figure Me Out. That one is just like... I often start my day with that one, and it puts me in a real weird mood. But yeah, I like it. And lastly, I'm gonna go with another real cheeseball. It's the song called "Bullseye" by Lucy Dacus. I don't know. Dacus. I have no idea where I found this song. I have no idea how I came across it. I don't know why it's in my playlist, but it's in there, and I fucking love it. It's also featuring, is their name Hosier? I don't know. I'm so fucking old. I don't know how to pronounce anything anymore. But it's on the playlist. Go listen. Bullseye. It's really nice. It's a lovely little song. It very much has like kind of, it's almost like if Stars was country. You know, it's got that kind of duality, two different voices, and they're kind of singing to each other, and it's melancholic, and it's really gorgeous, and yep, it's a bop. That was a side channel I wanted to create for ages, just reviewing songs. Just, is it a bop? And I wouldn't review a song that wasn't one. That was the gimmick of the show. Every time, it's a bop. And this is why I didn't create that show, because it is funny to exactly one people, and you're listening to them. But yeah, those are just the top 3 highlights of a really fun month. May was actually a great music month for me. Check out the playlist. Check out the full 2025 playlist as well on my profile. Feel free to follow me along on Spotify. I don't know, does having followers on there mean anything? I have no idea. Let's find out together. Okay, and watching the time, I have one last thing I want to do before we wrap things up. I just want to set my June intentions as I did last month. I really liked it, and even though I only kind of half achieved them, I'm going to try again. You know, incremental progress is still progress, right? So I've set myself two personal goals that I'm going to try out. One is, as I talked about recommending to you, I'm going to do myself, and I'm going to practice time blocking between intentional connection time and intentional solo time. So I'm going to kind of like build on the practice that I've already been doing, but I'm going to be a little bit more regimented about it. I'm going to block out my week, and I'm going to make sure to kind of slot in both different types of interactions. I'm going to really plan to be solo when I need to be and connected when I need to be. And I'm just going to kind of keep on being really reflective on my personal energy levels and kind of seeing what kind of information I can glean from that, whether it's about myself or about how I want to continue showing up for others. And the other piece is I'm going to fucking get this fucking collection of poetry off my fucking desk. I went to a bookstore the other day out on Main, and they actually sell they sell zines and chapbooks and stuff like that. And I started kind of formulating this idea of doing these little zine versions of some of the poems. I just haven't sat down and actually created the fucking things. You can see how frustrated I've been with this one project because I'm so roadblocked with it. But my intention is to create a couple of those zines out of a couple of those poems, and then replicate them, photocopy them, get them to Lucky Books, and try selling some. So that's my intention. By the end of June, I'm going to try, the word I'm blanking on is I'm going to sell it to them. It's a C word. Somebody scream it at me on the Instagram. Consignment? I'm going to try and consign a few zines to Lucky's and then go from there. So those are my two practices. One's creative, one's personal. We're going to see what we come up with at the end of June. Let me know what your goals are. Are you going to try similar ones? Are you going to try totally different ones? Fill me in. Let's keep this conversation going. I'm really curious to hear about what your sort of goals are, your aspirations. What are you trying to work on? And let's see if we can help each other out. And that's it. Thank you once again for listening through to the very end. It means the world to me. I always drag my feet recording these solo episodes until I get into it and I realize, oh my God, this is such a blast and I just love it and I love doing the show. And it means so much to me that you listen, that you keep coming back. So thank you. I love you. If you want more Friendless content, please be sure to sign up for the monthly Substack. You're going to get curated playlists, recommendations for movies, books, video games, all sorts of distractions, exclusive writing, and early access to the projects that I'm working on that I swear are still coming. I just keep on getting sidetracked. But all that and so much more, it's completely free. Sign up in the link in the show notes. But that's going to do it for me this week, so let's just wrap things up here. Thank you one more time for listening, and I hope I'm going to catch you back here next week for a brand new interview. But, as always, I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, I'm just going to say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweet peas.